Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Generalist. My name is Ilya Omansky. I'm very lucky that my friend and industry colleague, Travis Lishok, found a moment to speak with me. Travis and I have known each other for a few years now. We've collaborated on the continual learning study, and I think that was one of the highlights for me, and we'll get into those highlights for last year. That was a great highlight for me to have worked with him, but also have given more thought to how our fellow practitioners are building their competence and credibility, what kinds of resources, and maybe some shortcomings. And so that was a phenomenal accomplishment, I think, for us both. I'm also infinitely jealous of this man having gone and completed a degree in applied psychology. And I'm still looking for opportunities to do that myself. And he'll hopefully share a little bit more with you. But I'm looking forward to this conversation. Travis, it's a pleasure and a privilege to have you join this conversation. Thank you, my friend.
Ilya, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
There's lots to discuss because, listen, we can't find time to connect very often. You've been a great supporter of my continual learning platform, and you've given me excellent advice, which I hope I've implemented in bits and pieces on the platform. I've also seen how you've done a great service to the industry, and you've been connecting with all sorts of practitioners in parts of US and beyond. You certainly kept my spirits up, even though the situation around the world has been very dynamic and there's a lot more uncertainty. So I followed your writing, your conversations, and so thank you for having done that. Why don't we start with just a recap of how did 2021 go for you? What are some of the highlights? And we'll move from there.
Sure. So one of the first things that I thought of immediately was just how grateful I am to have some of these highlights when the world's going through so much uncertainty. So I'm incredibly grateful. And so I broke up some of these highlights into kind of like two categories. First, it was some projects around helping aspiring practitioners and other ones that were more centered around myself. So first, I'll talk about my project in helping some other younger professionals. So last year, about 12 months ago, I sat down and thought, okay, what two things or what three things do I need to do here at Untitled before I can move on to the next phase of my career? And two of the big ones were, one, first, helping at least one of the students in my user experience research class for my master's. Helping my fellow students there get an internship. And then the second one was to help another friend in my network who works around information security. And for the UX researcher, I was able to work with our team at Untitled, and they were super helpful. And we onboarded her as our user experience research intern. She worked on some really meaningful projects for our product team, for our marketing team. And then following her internship and following finishing her master's program, she got some really awesome job offers from some incredible brands. So I was really stoked to see that and able to check that box off in just doing my own small part there. And second, helping my other friend who's working in information security. Similarly, he also just finished a program with the concentration in cybersecurity. And as you know, I'm sure you've seen plenty of memes on LinkedIn about the ridiculous experience requirements for anything involving information security. And ironically, Untitled needed like a junior InfoSec guy, and we vetted him. He had perfect attitude, great credentials, and we onboarded him. And he was probably one of the most important hires I think they made in the last 12 months. He was incredibly dedicated to his work, maybe even more dedicated than I was. So being able to onboard him and get him his first year of experience was just really big for me. And then moving on to highlights that are more have to do with me. First, it was finally finishing my applied psychology master's. So that took about 18 months working full time, doing
Very
those
jealous,
classes.
very jealous, man.
Yeah, so accomplishing that was huge. And I got to work on some really incredible projects. So for example, for my treatise, basically the capstone project, as part of that project, what I did was I surveyed 100 corporate investigators and then conducted hour-long interviews with another 10 investigators to learn about their approach to investigations and how they look at risk. And that was probably one of the coolest projects I've ever got to do. So I was thrilled to do that. And then very last thing, unrelated to security, but I finally got my blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. For those of you that are unfamiliar, yeah, so in Jiu-Jitsu, when you start at the very bottom, you're a white belt. Generally, it takes probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years to finally get your blue belt, which is kind of like getting a bachelor. It's kind of like getting an associate's degree. It's like you finally learn the basics. And you have the building blocks to learn. You've learned how to learn, so to speak. So those are my big highlights for the year.
Man, I like how you started with using the word help, helping other practitioners, young and aspiring. I feel like that alone is already a very inspirational, or should be a very inspirational message to the rest of us, because it's very challenging to have the mental bandwidth when we're bogged down, first of all, with our day-to-day routines and tasks, but also then under pressure from the uncertainty that, for the most part, we have very little control over. And we're worried about our families, both those that are with us and those the extended families that are somewhere else. And in that environment, to have someone like yourself just still being out there and helping others and lifting them up, and then watching them progress, I think, man, that's like you just earned several degrees across the spectrum. Fantastic. Very I'm sure that there's now a group of people that are very grateful for all your contributions. So kudos to you. So I think I could also look at the 2021 as a year of accomplishment in a similar sense, because just like I've observed throughout the industry how people either had to really kind of devote their time to either directly to their families, or they were going through hardship and let's say had to move somewhere, or were going through kind of getting over COVID and all sorts of medical issues. And in the midst of all that, I can say that our team was very small, but we have onboarded also another analyst, and we have been coaching 2 analysts on our team. And I think what makes me feel very proud too is that one of them is now studying for the ACAMS certification, and that's the anti-money laundering certification. And we can see that the second analyst is also learning things that she could not have possibly been exposed to in her previous role at another company. And that makes us super proud. It's not just my accomplishment, but what I think what we've set up on our team is this method of continual learning, continual accomplishment, and just kind of constantly moving forward. So I'm really grateful that you're sharing that. I also, at some point, would like to talk to you more about how how the martial arts, particularly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because it is a very grueling martial art. Learning it is a very challenging undertaking. And it's both mentally and physically. How that informs your professional life. Do you mind sharing a couple of thoughts about that?
Sure. Let's see. At first, I think there's something really important about, maybe I have like 10 years experience working in security, but it's very humbling to go to a jiu-jitsu school and step on the mat and go back to ground zero, to having just no knowledge at all. And so it's very humbling, especially because anyone in the class, whether it's a 17-year-old kid from high school who maybe did wrestling for a couple of years, or maybe there's some people in my class that are in their mid 50s and they're quite good at what they do. They push me around. So I think it's definitely great for humility. And it's funny, I was having a conversation with one of the guys in the class and I asked him why he started. And he originally started because he wanted to learn more about leadership and teaching. And I thought that that was one of the most fascinating things, because I do think like as you gain more experience, as you gain months and years of experience, you do learn much more about how to teach people new things. And you gain public speaking experience, you gain experience teaching people. And yeah, I just think it's also great for everything, all like leadership type qualities as well.
With that, I can only recommend that more of us look at least the attributes of how jiu-jitsu is delivered as content and how it's then taught to students, and perhaps other opportunities that sometimes could appear to be far outside the box. What I like about what you're saying in general is that you've taken, a set of skills or that you were hoping to acquire from a completely different field. But it only seems to be completely different, because what you just described is that field also teaches you skills that are completely transferable. And this is what I appreciate about, I think, the opportunities that we have in our industry. We will talk about that, what we're hoping, and that our industry will feature, let's say, in this year and going forward. But I feel like it's that ability to almost build this polymathic mindset. We have a lot of opportunities to do that, because by virtue of our just the application of our skills, we do have to connect with people from nearly all walks of life, and in different functional roles when you think about organizations. And so I like how you're drawing lessons from one field to apply in the other. I want to briefly ask you about your degree in applied psychology. Do you mind sharing a couple of thoughts from there, and how has that informed you in addition to getting your blue belt in jiu-jitsu?
Sure. So as part of my degree program, I got to take a range of courses around statistics, around consumer psychology, human behavior, user experience research. And I think some of the most important things that I took away from it they all had to do with the research aspect. And that was around interviewing users, because there's so much that goes into the way that you ask questions, the way that you frame a question, the way that the words that you use, the way that you phrase it, the setting that you're in. And I think one of the most valuable things that I learned was just the practice of asking better questions. And I think this is perfectly suited for security, because oftentimes we're interviewing so many stakeholders. We're interviewing people who are the end users. We're interviewing people who maybe they're involved in an incident. And I think there's definitely an art to the way of asking questions and interviewing people and eliciting information so that we can make better decisions as security people. So that was one of the really big things that I took away. And then also just learning a little bit about how to analyze data and how to work with data a little bit, because I know so many managers and so many executives are obsessed with mostly like things that they can quantify. So I do think that that was also a strength of the program. But for me, what was huge was learning more about asking the right questions.
It's good that you also mentioned kind of user experience. If I recall correctly, anytime you're doing any sort of user experience interviews or user experience design, there is a significant degree of empathy that one would need to apply, because I'm going through a project now where we're designing some educational content for a very specific community. It's faith-based community. And that community has generally no security background. And we had to, both myself and our team members, we had to think very carefully about how to deliver what might appear to be very technical subject matters in a way that demonstrates empathy toward the audience and how they would perceive the content we're sharing with them. And a few times we had to repeat ourselves to again reassure the audience that we completely respect the fact that they don't have background in our field, and that if we start using exclusive language and a lot of terms that are very unfamiliar to them, that it would literally negate and reduce the value of the content that we're sharing with them. So I think it actually, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think it's something that I also drew from the field of user experience design, because it was also a recent revelation for me. And there you have it. I'm very excited that you went through that program and that it taught you those lessons. That's fantastic. Switching to 2022 and beyond. Of course, a lot of things are happening around us. I recently got pulled into a conversation that I wasn't expecting at all, because I'm based in Asia, but we were discussing crisis between Ukraine and Russia, for example, and some ramifications. So we had to, again, kind of discuss internally on our team, because we do work internationally, like what does that mean for us, right? So there's this type of crisis. And then for some people, and I hear it now more often than not, they're saying, well, can't we just have one crisis? Why do we have to manage 5, you know? And so I see that folks in our client pool, in our network, are concerned that COVID and the pandemic is enough of a crisis to deal with, because it brings us significant uncertainty 2 years down the road. And now people are dealing with all sorts of additional crises. It could be weather events. It could be this standoff between Russia and Ukraine. And yet we also have to think about in terms of our industry, in terms of how sustainable it can be, and what benefit it can bring in amid this uncertainty. What are you thinking about? How are you forming your opinions and your further professional direction for 2022 and beyond, in terms of hopes and fears? Like, what are you hoping our profession, well, I call it a profession, still not sure whether it is, but what can security offer? What should it look like this year and going forward as a benefit? And then what are your fears about some shortcomings, both within our profession and outside it?
Starting off with hopes. So things that are making me hopeful right now is, first, the amount of job mobility that I'm seeing. So I've never seen a time on LinkedIn where so many of my peers that are in similar roles, similar age, similar amount of experience, have so much mobility and are able to easily change organizations and pursue whatever their new interests are or whatever different growth paths there are. So I'm very optimistic when I see how easily it is for some of my peers to change organizations. And then also that too kind of forces different organizations to rethink, okay, how are we going to retain the talent here? Does it have to do with compensation? Is it about mental health? Is it about like growth paths within these different organizations? So I'm very optimistic when I see the job market and the amount of mobility between organizations for security practitioners. That's one thing that I'm very optimistic about. And then two, another thing that makes me hopeful is, so one positive from the pandemic was that it forced so many educational institutions to bring more of their courses, more of their material online, and to really take a more professionalized approach and allow for hybrid and remote and online type of education. So I'm very optimistic about that, but that kind of leans into one of the fears that I have. So a couple of weeks ago, just as like a personal research project for a few hours a day for a few consecutive days, I was just doing research online, looking at, okay, what security content and what security educational content can I find online around physical security type topics or business continuity or things outside of information security. I made this long list of topics and resources, but the one thing that really stuck out to me was that the information security people were so much more organized and their content was so much more in like a curated fashion and easily digestible. And when it came to like other topics around things that I want to be more involved in, like physical security design and risk management, stuff like that, that type of material was just not quite up to the same standard as the content around information security. So I think that's one big area where practitioners like us have an opportunity to create more educational content for our peers, for those people who are doing their own self-directed education outside of the normal 9 to 5. So I think that's one big area where we can improve. And then a second fear I had also relates to information security and physical security. And it's that, and this is something that I've seen you talk about as well, is that there's a bit of a gap when it comes to connecting ideas between our information security peers and our physical security peers. And it's just people on the physical security side, I think they tend to shy away from learning just gaining broad fundamental education in those information security areas, just to have knowledge about like some of the different information security frameworks that are out there, for just the common challenges that their information security team members are facing, and things that they can also help support information security teams with. So that's one area, one other area where I think we can improve.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I was listening to a very strange piece of content, piece of media on YouTube recently. There's a program that's called Soft White Underbelly. And it's primarily features people from very like fringe corners of society, primarily in the States. But there was an interview with a hacker. His name is Gummo. Okay, he's considered to be one of the early, I guess, stars, quote unquote, in the hacking community. And both has probably either an expunged criminal record, but also has worked with the government to bring down some of the other criminals in cyberspace. And it was very interesting to hear his perspective, where he, having a very solid set of skills in his field really looks down upon the field itself, because he says that, and I'm obviously paraphrasing, so please, those who may choose to watch this content, please, double check. But the way I understood what he was saying is that we had so many years to actually plan this out and make this right and get our act together. But because technological innovation is so scaled and also so diversified that it far outpaces our efforts to try to infuse protection into this very diversified arena. And so his concerns were such that they're very, very trivial on the one hand, because he says that it's pretty bad in general. Just like, people think that a lot of these systems and technologies are protected, they're not. And at the same time, he also talked about how, I think, even in such an environment, there's definitely hope about like taking a step back and trying to organize yourselves across the board. You're talking about physical and information protection. It's important to I think widen your lens, widen your perspective, and once you have done that, I think more opportunities for improvement will arise. And I noticed the same things you mentioned, where information security still continues to be its own camp, and what we call physical security continues to be its own camp. Now, the efforts to bring those two camps together so far are very inconsistent and certainly underwhelming, because while some associations in the industry may be joining forces and they may say, well, we're going to deliver content together, or we're going to develop maybe a standard together, I've yet to see the results. And the other thing is that as practitioners, we're so bogged down on a daily basis with just project work that adopting new standards or adapting to them is a challenge, and it takes a hell of a long time to actually get to that state. Talk about zero trust, for example. There's a lot of discussion about zero trust, but my concern is we have a very complex situation where only very well-funded organizations have actually enough bandwidth, both in human resources, human capital, the knowledge base, and also the financial resources and operational resources to actually implement bits and pieces of something that like zero trust. Where does that leave the rest of the organizations that don't have any of their resources? They barely have a system administrator that works in-house, and then the rest of the stuff is outsourced. Or if it's outsourced, it's only for trivial support functions. So I think that there's a disparity there. And I also notice how practitioners like to talk a big game, but the actual technologies that are available for, let's say, improving the protection measures or protection state, those technologies require a second look as to what you said before, user experience, because they still are far more clunky than they should be in terms of design and the graphical user interfaces and user experience overall. They very rarely afford complete asset visibility, which like in 2022, I wonder about, like, shouldn't we have designed things like that 20 years ago? Because we knew how to develop software and what user experience was, what UI was many, many moons ago. And here we are still pushing out more products, more solutions that inherently have bad design. And so those things worry me quite a bit, that we're like, it's almost like, you know, who was it? E.O. Wilson that said that humans have Paleolithic brain, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. I kind of worry about that. Now, I say this lightly. I could obviously be more blunt, but it worries me when I apply this to our field. But I'm hopeful that, like yourself and like many other folks that I'm connected with, some of them are, you know, truly are at the forefront of our industry, that we're starting to hopefully move in the right direction in terms of where we seek talent. Talk about talent shortage. I notice how the skill set and the background of folks that are stepping up in the industry. And I could say that probably that's more true to of the information security community, is that their backgrounds are more diverse than the backgrounds on the physical security side. I'm hopeful that from this year and going forward, we will see the physical security side become more diversified in terms of backgrounds of practitioners that are stepping up to lead the industry forward. And so another hope that I have, and it's very much related to my learning platform, is that it is more and more apparent to me that the deeper knowledge in psychology and in design in general, and then in advanced features of both of those disciplines, helps inform a security or asset protection practitioner's efforts and their knowledge base, and literally put their credibility on steroids because of a few things you mentioned, like being able to apply leadership qualities or interview qualities, or understand and apply empathy to different client pools and, you know, different situations, different projects. I feel like that is where I'm hoping that these seemingly unrelated fields will begin to be blended more and more into our overall security industry, because to me, it's one industry. I'd like to see this as one industry. Again, pointing back to what you said about how we have these two camps. I'd like it to be one camp. We're all protection professionals, or should be professionals. Another thing that I'm hoping for is that we will have a more solid academic base. I was just very pleasantly surprised when a friend of mine asked me for a reference letter, as she is hoping to apply into a PhD program, you know, and it will be related to our field. And I noticed how a few other practitioners are moving in that direction. They're not waiting till our industry creates that platform. But again, I worry that maybe that number of practitioners that are exploring these options is few and far in between, but also that the programs are scattered and that they don't have a consistent and accredited curriculum, the foundational curriculum. So to me, as much as we beat down on higher education, especially in the US, there's definitely a lot of conversation about the negative sides of this, but I feel like these foundational skills to inform your professional competence and credibility are only built in an academic setting. You can then go and apply them, hence your degree in applied psychology. But I worry that we might not still have the sufficient programs available and consistently developed, not just in the States, but around the world. Here, I can tell you, just to even find talent to come into the risk management kind of sphere is extremely difficult. The critical thinking skills are not really being taught at the level that is necessary. And so the capability of talent to even enter the field is in question. And so it really falls down to the managers, to leaders in the industry to really take the role of being coaches and guides for this young talent. So I like what you said about how organizations are rethinking their means and methods of bringing and retaining young talent. I think this ability to coach and show the path for development in our sector would be one of the key features of such organizations. I know that you have started contributing, and I think forgive me, you're on the board of the EP Square organization that is trying to stand up a standard for executive protection, at least in the States, if not internationally. Please, can you say a few words about the organization, what your role is, and what is the core objective?
Definitely. So I'll start by just providing some background. So it's the Board of Executive Protection Professionals that you're talking about, and it's led by James Cameron. And it's essentially, our board is 15 members, and our big goal is to establish an ANSI standard, so American National Standards Institute, to establish a standard for providing executive protection. So as you know, ANSI has tons of standards around cybersecurity, around conducting risk assessments, around conducting employee background checks. But something like executive protection, there's no standard out there. So if a CSO comes to me today or comes to you, Ilya, and they say, so how do I assess what my team is doing? I think they're doing an awesome job, but how do I know if this is up to what professionals in the industry consider to be a standard? So really our goal is to develop that standard. And the way that we're doing it is, so ANSI has like a very structured approach to developing a standard. And among those, we develop a technical committee and a working group, of which there will be over 100 members. So with the working group, we'll have approximately 100 people collaborating together to develop this standard, which, similar to other ANSI standards, it'll essentially be a book. And as the working group starts to develop the standard, it'll go to the technical committee. They'll review it, they'll approve some portions, they'll reject some portions, they'll send other pieces back to be revised by the working group. And the working group is just made up of people like me. It's industry practitioners. Each person might have their own specialized niche that they are best cut out to contribute to. And let's see. So that's really the big goal of the people that are doing the work. And my role individually is kind of twofold. So first, I'm on the board. So I help with all of our administrative duties. We have regular meetings where we task out what needs to be done. Maybe it's reviewing resumes of people that are applying to be in the technical committee and the working group, or maybe it's just helping gain more visibility about what the board is up to. So there's those administrative tasks. And then secondly, I'm also part of the working group. So I'll be contributing to different portions of the standard itself. For me, I'll probably mostly be contributing around investigative research, threat assessment, and technology type topics. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. And why I joined? First, I really like their mission because there's so much content and material out there. There must be over hundreds of books written about executive protection, but there's no group has formed together to collaborate to develop and agree upon any kind of standard. So I really do like the mission of trying to professionalize the industry even more so than it currently is. But also, I just looked at it as another opportunity to learn. I've never participated in developing a standard before, so I do get to learn about the intricate process of developing the standard itself. But then also it exposes me to all the content in the standard, and I do like doing research, writing, contributing, so it kind of fits perfectly. So it's a great opportunity to learn.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Very admirable effort. I like how a team of practitioners is trying to develop a standard. I like also that the standard will be registered with ANSI, because more and more it's kind of necessary to assess professional capabilities on the basis of what industry peers have agreed upon. Agreement is something that, unfortunately, it seems to me, our industry has been lacking. We're often, again, kind of left to our own devices within our organization. So we feel sometimes that our skill set is sufficient. And yet, when someone looks across the industry and is able to look at various organizations, various projects, it becomes clear that at the very minimum, there's no consistency. And then more so than you find lack of prudent judgment or lack of competence. And so I like that you guys are trying to do this. Two things that I'm hoping that you'll bring to the table, in addition to what you mentioned, is first of all, your degree in psychology, because I feel that this would be a certain significant boost to any young and aspiring practitioner that wants to be aligned with the standard and certified under it. And eventually, hopefully, even have an academic program that is accredited, that can apply the qualities of the standard or the requirements of the standard into a curriculum, that they will learn about psychology, and particularly human behavior and decision making. Another point I know you will contribute very significantly on will be this idea of continual learning, and not just continual learning per se, but continual learning in a quality, with quality content or with quality approach. Because it's one thing to say continual learning. Many organizations have adopted this phrase, but what I notice is that there's still, unfortunately, a huge disparity in what that continual learning looks like. For example, organizations still are relying on annual kind of training, right? And I find that to be just, again, something from the past. It's not something that really has worked, and it's been proven not to work. And yet many organizations are still in that mode. So I hope that you will bring a lot of ideas about how to actually transition from being certified, from having received your creds, if you will, but then understanding that there will continue to be a rigorous process for you to acquire new knowledge and then recertify in a way that will be meaningful, that will check your competence and credibility with rigor, rather than just give you recertification points for attending lunches and dinners and a few events where you can just look around but not really be certain about what you're looking at. So really excited that you're contributing, and that the team there entrusted you with bringing more ideas and more competence to the table. So fantastic. It's a very good segue into a question of, or maybe a message for young and aspiring practitioners. We talked about how your 2021 went, what you've observed. We also talked about what your hopes and fears are for 2022 and beyond. This information and your new participation with the Executive Protection Board, how does that make you think about what message to give to young and aspiring practitioners going forward? What should they be thinking about? What kind of guidance would you offer them?
So as I was thinking about this over the last couple of days, I stumbled across an interesting quote that I wanted to share that I think kind of encapsulates my message of what I wanted to say. And this comes from General Mattis. So he's former Secretary of Defense, 4-star general, Marine Corps commander, very esteemed military person. And this is what he had to say about professional development. He said, "If you haven't read hundreds of books, then you're functionally illiterate and you'll be incompetent because your personal experience alone aren't broad enough to sustain you." And what I really like about this is that it speaks to humility and that how much we should be aspiring to be more. And I think for young professionals in really any work setting, I think one of the most important things is to take complete ownership of your personal and your professional development, because I think it's really only in rare instances where we tend to be surrounded by people that are going to actively invest their time in nurturing us and helping us grow, because they're pulled in so many directions. You have a pandemic going on. We have personal obligations. We have work obligations. We have all of the projects that we're responsible for. We have to report to this person and that person. So I think we should celebrate those people, but I think those are kind of rare instances. And for most people, it's not so easy and the road is not so simple. And I think the ideal is really to take 100% ownership of your own learning, to reach out to your peers to learn from them, to reach out to people that could potentially mentor you and to learn from them. And I don't think that's actually something that's all that easy to do. I think that is also a difficult path, because for any young professional, depending on the environment that you're in, when one person is in a group and they're trying to do something exceptional, sometimes that creates odd dynamics in the group. So I think it also creates its own challenges, but I do think most importantly, it's up to the individual to take 100% ownership of their development, and they can't necessarily only rely on their peers and their coworkers.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I can only add 3 points to what you said. One is what helped me is to, aside from I guess I've always had a pretty decent memory and also observational skills. What helped me quite a bit is the ability to take good notes. Here's why. It may appear to be a trivial step in one's development, but notes, the process of taking notes itself actually helps you retain content. So whatever setting you're in, if you're able to take notes or take notes immediately after you've attended any sort of educational setting, be sure to write down what your observations are, because that'll help you retain that important content. The next thing to me is not just to be content with having attended, let's say, a learning event or an opportunity to learn from peers, whatever that may be, networking sessions or an industry event where you're learning about, let's say, new tech like ISC West. But also ask yourself the question of how is what I'm learning or what I've acquired through this new experience, how does that apply to my daily routines? Not everything will, but there will be points that you can begin adopting some either habits or tools that will make you someone who can recommend these things to others, and someone who may begin using these tricks or these tools or these tactics, strategies in your own environment. Using these things in an applied fashion is far better than just having learned them and just moved on, right? Because they kind of wither away as that level of knowledge. So applying those things in your settings, in your specific project settings, whatever that work may be, is a way to retain and build on that knowledge. And thirdly, last but not least, is I notice, and I mentioned it to you before, how I notice a lot of young and aspiring practitioners to this day lack critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills in terms of not taking content and material that they're being given, that they're being provided with, at face value. You always have to have bravery and courage to ask critical questions, like, why is this true? On what basis? I've given plenty of examples, in our previous conversations with you, and just, in our informal discussions, where content is given, even if it's statistical content, but when you dig a little bit more deeply, you find out that there's actually no merit to that content whatsoever. Somebody just made it up, okay? And so be very careful about information that comes your way. It may be presented as the Bible, if you will, or it may be presented as fact and truth, but you have to discern for yourself whether that's actually the case. And we live in an age right now that, unfortunately, the levels of trust in various institutions and people all across the board, right? It could be governments, nonprofits, media, and everything. The levels of trust are declining, and they're not very strong. And therefore, what may have been true some time ago may have been accepted truth, even though there may be no practical foundation to it or facts. Is not true anymore, and it's being debunked. And so that critical thinking skills help you build true competence and credibility, and operate with facts. Just to give you an example, literally within the last 24 hours, I was asked to check on another security consultant's work. They provided guidance to a client about implementation of vehicle restraint barriers. And when they did so, they basically said, though, other than this particular type of barrier, there is, first of all, it doesn't have any ratings or rated products. And secondly, just put it in, and if the local municipality tells you that it's not approved, just think about that, right? If they tell you that it's not approved, just move it back, move it back to your property line. When I had to look at it, right, it was painfully obvious. A 2-year-old can look at what that consultant said and literally poke holes in it. Not everything that they said, but in a lot of things that they said. So there was a lack of critical thinking, lack of prudent consulting, lack of just, evaluation, if you will. And when we looked at it, and it wasn't just myself, it was, a few folks on the team that I'm working with. When we looked at it, we were all like looking at each other. It's like, this is garbage. This is poor consulting. And this is a person that's, I think is at least trying to build a name for themselves, and still can. It's like, as long as we're able to accept that we failed at something and then we move on and we do better, that's perfectly fine. But the client is not any better for it. They already spent the money. So I want to stress that point, that critical thinking skills, in my humble opinion, are still out there for the takers. It's just a matter of who will be the taker and whether you're serious about implementing that in your daily life and your professional life. So I just wanted to kind of close on that example. Travis, I am wishing you a very safe and healthy 2022. I wish, and I know that you will be very highly sought after and regarded, no matter where you go. And I wish you to be engaged in things, like you said, that are challenging, but also very, very interesting, and they make use of the skills that you're acquiring every day, and that you are also given opportunities to learn. And so I wish that 2022 and the coming years will offer that for you, and really hoping to see you in person very soon. But any closing words from you?
No, I really appreciate the time to chat today, and I loved all of your points there on the end for young and aspiring practitioners, especially around note taking. That's such a good one. Just taking notes and creating your own knowledge library that you could go back to and use later. So I loved all those points, and yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to chat and hear some of your thoughts on these important topics. And I wish you and your family all the best.
Thank you very much. And on that note, wishing everyone to stay safe and healthy. And until next time.
Thanks.